Absolutely. Thank you. So our talk's going to be around governing the cloud our way, operating cloud custodian at scale. I guess kind of start out with I think probably everybody's got one of these days, but obviously the comments and things that we're going to mention are not necessarily reflective of JPMorgan Chase, and therefore JP doesn't guarantee the accuracy or reliability of the information. So my name is Roy Crowder. I'm an executive director here at JPMorgan, and I'm head of core engineering for our cybersecurity technology and controls organization.
Raj? I'm Rajbr Sandhu, vice president, the technical lead for core engineering teams.
Yeah, and so we run a team of approximately 33 to 34 engineers doing work like this across around 5 Scrum teams. Custodian is kind of one small part of what our team overall does, but we thought this would be an awesome time to come in and give everybody a chance to take a look at what we're doing. So with that, we'll kind of jump into how we deploy Custodian at scale. All right, so today at JPMorgan, we've got around 50 to 60,000 technologists across the organization. Many lines of business doing probably thousands of things. A subset of those folks actually work in public cloud today, but that list is ever expanding. Every day new teams, new organizations are getting more and more involved. We do have a multi-cloud adoption strategy at JPMorgan. We are in 2 major clouds now, but at the same time, we are actively expanding to many more over the next couple of years. So we've been using Custodian for approximately 4 years now. We've used that through a centralized deployment. It's very different from the open source tool as it stands today. So a lot of the modifications we've done. We started out monitoring around, I don't know, Raj, 100, 110 accounts, something like that. And over the last 4 years, we've grown to multiple thousands of accounts today. We actively monitor approximately 140 event or what we consider reconciliatory driven policies. What I mean by that is we do the event driven, that's pretty standard for Custodian, but we also run things periodically to make sure we didn't happen to miss anything. The one thing that's kind of interesting for us that we haven't seen a lot of other places do is we actually crowdsource a lot of our policy creation across the business. We'll get into that later in the presentation. We actually have a large following inside JP of folks doing this kind of work, and we'll kind of touch on how and why we do that. And then, of course, for us, being a very regulated environment, being a financial institution, efficacy of our controls is a big thing. And so in this case, we're going to spend some time in the presentation discussing how we actually test the effectiveness of our Custodian policies and provide those back to our auditors and regulatory constituents. Okay. So kind of to start our journey, one of the things that we started talking about around 4 years ago were what are the high-level requirements for something that would provide us detective and reactive capabilities in our environment. The first thing we started talking about is our shared responsibility model. And when we look at our shared responsibility model, we actually look at it from the app teams that do the implementation of their applications. They have a responsibility to the security of the platform. The actual platform teams that build the infrastructure that run those applications, and then also, of course, the cloud platform providers that we deal with day to day. As far as the shared responsibility model is concerned, we wanted something that was adoptable by technical and non-technical people alike. A lot of times we have auditors and things like that come in that want to review our policy as code or governance as code capabilities, but they don't necessarily all understand code. And so that requires a lot of engineering cycles to pull an engineer off and have them explain that code or things like that to those folks. And we're audited somewhere around 6 to 7 times a year. So, we wanted something that was easily readable and digestible by somebody that was non-technical. We also wanted something that lended itself to the adoption of the application and the application teams, but also the platform. That's, for us, was an important thing to offer the capability to our app teams in case they had a control that we don't necessarily manage as far as the security baseline. Maybe it's a one-off or something very specific to their implementation. And this tool, the tool that we needed to select would need to offer that capability. And then, of course, we needed something that tied into our open source model. Most of the tools open source in relation to internal to the firm. Most of our tools and services that we build, we want other teams to come and contribute to those things. And in this case, it's going to tie back to our crowdsourcing model and things like that. Moving on to security baseline, we needed something that was programmatic, right? We wanted to be able to do integration with our automated onboarding capabilities and account creation. So we needed something that we could actually write code with and do the adoption. And of course, we needed it usable at every level of implementation, dev, UAT, and prod, and offer a consistent user experience for the folks like the app teams. When they go to do a deployment dev, it's the same as when they do the deployment in prod. So we need that to be configurable and also consistent. Compliance and visibility. I think most companies have some level of this, but for us, it's definitely the auditability, logging, and the extensive reporting capabilities. It's something we were definitely looking for. And then again, most companies have the cost at scale problem. I think this is an obvious concern for most people. It's the same for financial institutions. We want the most cost-effective tool that we can find. So looking at security at scale, in this case, we asked ourselves a few questions, and this goes from the requirements to being a little more granular. In this case, we wanted to select a tool that, like I said before, had the ability to span both platform and application. But in this case, what we were asking is, what tool provides us the best bang for our buck and where? So in this case, we had to think about, is the platform the best location to put this, or is the application? This ties into the next point, which is the snowflake. We obviously didn't want to put it in the application, not first, just to make sure that we don't have these snowflakes where developers go off and they build all their own controls and every implementation is different. So in that case, we decided platform is probably the best place to start, and it gives us the most control, in terms of our security baseline, which we'll cover in a second. Targeting standardization, we basically just wanted to remove the duplication of the control. It allows us better auditability at the end of the day. If you have 12 developer teams implement the same control 12 different ways, auditability gets really, really difficult. As far as the security baseline, we just wanted our controls to be in place at the get-go, at the very start, when a dev team gets access to an account in public cloud. This, to us, seemed the easiest way is to deploy that as part of the platform alongside the adoption of an account or the creation of an account. And this allows developers to have a consistent experience through dev, UAT, and prod. And then automation obviously is key to any level at scale, but in our case, remediation was the kicker. We wanted automated remediation to be able to do near real-time fixes so that we didn't need 1,000 analysts with eyes on glass at any given time. This allows us to kind of run after-action reports and allow people to kind of view some of these things in bulk. There can obviously be some false positives there, but in general, this has worked out really well for us. So why did we choose Custodian over the myriad of other products out there? Obviously, most applications or services that do these types of things are event-driven to some extent. So this one was just kind of a given for us. But the declarative policy was definitely an important factor. Being able to write, essentially, in our case, the YAML policy, it gives us a framework that non-developers, though they may not understand YAML, can actually get a sense of, with a little practice, read through and understand what we're doing. They really just need a little predicate logic understanding, and I think they can grasp pretty quickly how the filtering and the action systems work. So this one was definitely a major factor for us. Source control, I think if you're going to build anything at scale, you're probably going to need the ability to do source control. For us, this played right into our ability to do our open source model and crowdsource and things, which we'll cover here shortly. So this was a no-brainer for us. The flexibility of platform, when we started looking at the solution, we knew that they were going to be doing GCP, Azure, and others. And so we knew as part of our 4 to 5 year plan, we were definitely going to be at least in 2 clouds, if not more than that. So that really lent itself. We really wanted something that could be spanned across our ecosystem. And that ties into the extensible section here. Customization for us is always important. A lot of things that we tend to do aren't just, we don't always just use the defaults. We actually write a lot of custom actions and things like that. And so this was definitely a key of selection. A lot of the COTS tools, they have a big baseline, but they don't have a lot of extensibility built into their solution. And then, of course, from a regulatory environment, the logging and auditability, basically just the JSON objects that pop out of Custodian was nice, as well as the integration of like C7 mailer and things that give you SNS access and things. So we can get real-time results if we need them, or also log that content out to S3 and other places. So those are kind of the key factors. Also, just as a tidbit here, we're also PCI compliant with Custodian. So if anybody's looking to do that, we've actually made that happen as well. So you should be able to as well.
Yep. Hand it over, Raj. So as Roy mentioned, due to the scale and the regulatory environment that we operate in, we had to make some big design decisions when we started rolling out Custodian a little over 4 years ago. We wanted to ensure the integrity of the controls, have a solution that integrates seamlessly into the platform, provides an easy and centralized configuration management and visibility capabilities. So to achieve all that, we made the decision to implement Custodian in a centralized deployment as shown here. We did evaluate rolling out Custodian in a local fashion into every account, but that we quickly realized that the approach wasn't going to scale with what was coming down the pipeline from the business. So those of you who are already familiar with Cloud Custodian understand the workflow that is depicted here in that red dotted box in the middle. That is the default Custodian flow when you implement Custodian with the CloudTrail mode at least in AWS environment. So what we have done here is we took default Custodian and we built some wrappers around it, so that way we can scale it with our public cloud adoption. So one of the main things that we have done here is on the top left of this diagram is integrated Custodian into our account management lifecycle. So anytime a new account is provisioned, there's a call that gets made, that is made to a broker service. What that broker service does is it has a list of defined steps to execute for Custodian. And one of the first things it does is it goes and looks at the account metadata, figures out what the account capability is, what the line of business is going to be for this given account, and it aligns that account with the set of controls that should be that are applicable for that account. Once it figures all that out, it goes into that account and actually paves the required resources in there, including IAM, CloudWatch forwarding rules, which then starts forwarding events to that centralized Custodian account. Once it does that, it collects all that information and passes it over to the Custodian centralized account, to the account management plane that we built for Custodian. It consumes all the information and stores that information in a database. So with the database, we have a centralized configuration management place where we're able to enable, disable, modify control configurations with programmatically with one API call. This allows us to apply configurations at a much quicker scale across thousands of accounts, from any point in time, and it goes into effect right away. So if we look at this diagram at the bottom, this is where like, when a new account comes on board, the account provisioning process paves everything. The events starts forwarding to the centralized account. So any change to a resource would trigger a CloudWatch rule. Then the event gets forwarded to the centralized account, and that's when the default custodian behavior kicks in. It picks up the events, figures out what custodian lambda needs to be triggered. Once it triggers that, we have built some custom integrations with the database backend that actually it uses to look up the control configurations on the fly. It goes to database, asks, hey, is this control enabled for this account? Is the detection enabled? Is the remediation enabled? Or are there any exceptions for this given account? So it figures all that on the fly during execution, and we're able to do that with because we have that account provisioning lifecycle, all that integrated into the account from the very beginning. And we also have real-time SOC integrations, and all the data from custodian flows downstreams into systems for reporting and dashboarding purposes. Um, so with this design, we've been able to solve the scale problem, sort out the scale problem for the design and any integrations. But the one challenge we still did not solve with this design was how do we continue to ramp up on the policy coverage, right? As every day the business has new requirements, they want new services enabled. Who was going to sit there and write new custodian policies every day? It wasn't going to scale with one team just sitting there and getting requests from 50,000 technologists sitting there trying to adopt cloud, and writing policies to adapt and cater to all the customers. So what we have done is, this is where we decided to actually crowdsource our policy generation, policy creation, um, because we have multiple regulatory bodies that we have to be compliant with, and they all have their own set of requirements on top of what we have already built in the baseline that gets rolled out into every account. And then on top of that, we also got our internal teams, control domain authorities, that are continuously evaluating, and ensuring a public cloud meets the auditing and security control requirements. One of the big factors here is that, like Roy mentioned, we got thousands of technologies looking to adopt public cloud, and every day they are putting forth new requests for new services. Anytime there's a new request comes in for a new service, which means more custodian policies, someone has to go write those policies so before we can enable that service. So with this crowdsourcing model, we're pushing some of that responsibility onto the dev teams, onto every team, so we're able to do distributed development at scale and enable new policies as new services are being enabled, we're removing ourselves from being the bottleneck in this scenario. So um, as we allow other people to come and write policies, right? How do we achieve this, right, without actually compromising the integrity of the controls, and ensuring auditability and efficacy? To achieve that, what we have done is a few things we have done here. We have created policy standards to ensure that all controls or that are being created have the same information, including everything from standardized naming conventions to like set of fields that we require for every YAML policy, which then gets consumed, and we generate automated documentation for cyber ops teams, for compliance teams, so they understand the control configurations much easily. On top of that, we have built a comprehensive policy development guide for everyone to ensure people understand the policy development lifecycle, which integrates into our strategic release cycle for controls. Every new control that we write has to go into detect mode first, has to gets implemented in the lower environments, and then at that point we start evaluating the data that comes out of it using our downstream systems, so we can actually assess the risk before we start enabling like remediation, automated remediations that Roy talked about. So we build all that into our release cycle, and that ties into our automated testing. So we integrate that automated testing into the pipeline for all controls to ensure every control is tested before every release. So it doesn't matter if control is being updated, new control is being added, everything goes through the same pipeline, gets tested along the way. So with this model, we have adopted and embraced the open source model, so we can scale Custodian and our controls environment on all fronts. So with this open source model, as you see, we have other people coming in and writing policies, adding tests. So we needed to build an enhanced testing framework here, so that our auditors and auditor and compliance teams actually understand the controls being implemented and tested. So something that's easy to read, something that they can easily consume. So what we have done is we have adopted an open source model. Roy, you want to go to the next slide real quick? So we have adopted an open source framework called Rajbr framework, along with their standard Python unit testing to provide an easy to read testing scenarios for everyone across the firm. Doesn't matter if you're a technologist, doesn't matter if you're a compliance officer. So over here on the right-hand side, this is just one example we have here, is that we have a test case for AWS security groups, right? This is probably the most common one you have heard a million times. You open up you create a security group with the rule for port 22, and you open it up to the world. And the test is actually it expects the controls to come in and delete that rule, and it validates that against that given security group. And we do this for every single control that we write. And the testing framework actually creates these easily consumable reports for auditing and for evidencing purposes along the way. So we do this across the board for every guardrail, and this is how we test each of our guardrails and ensures its efficacy. And this is how we're able to actually do it at scale, and then the pace we're moving at, going into multi-cloud. We're using the same frameworks across the board to ensure we have a standard way of creating new policies, testing them along the way, and then it's happening on every single build, on every single release. Back to you, Roy.
Thanks, Raj. So in summary, basically, if you take anything from this presentation, take a look forward to your next 3 to 5 years, if you're just getting ready to adopt Custodian or something like that, and really understand the trajectory of your cloud adoption. Are you going to be purely cloud? Are you going to be multi-cloud, hybrid cloud of on-prem and public, or private and public? At the end of the day, if you just have a few accounts, you can probably get away with the ad hoc development and the unstructured, ad hoc deployments and unstructured development. However, if you're seeing the growth on the horizon, or you're basically already in the weeds of something this, at scale, then you really should take the time to understand your future situation and make the decisions that enable you to scale along with your business. The things that we've kind of covered over, but I'll reiterate, you need an effective SDLC. If you're going to do anything at scale, you're going to have that. Crowdsourcing for us is working. It works at scale, and we're doing it across multiple lines of business. It may not be for everyone. We know that, but it's definitely working for us. So definitely take a look at possibly doing that. Every org needs some kind of reporting to some degree, but you should pick solutions that are extensible to meet your expanded needs, not just what you need now. And then finally, if all else, if you don't even choose Custodian, if you decide to go and do your own thing, whatever, automating is everything with scale. We say accept nothing less, automate anything and everything, and be absolutely aggressive with anybody else in your organization, and enforce the fact that they will also automate as well, right? So what's next for us? On our horizon, obviously, we're going to continue expanding our policy coverage. We're at 140 now. That's just going to keep growing. Visibility enhancements for us, particularly in the regulatory space, we always need better reporting and visibility to everything that we do, and so that's always something we're looking to handle. I think I saw some questions in here around exception handling. We can definitely get to those. We're actually looking to do further exception handling and enhancements to the point where we can remove the developer completely and hand that off to a risk manager to manage who gets an exception and how and when and why, and there's a whole approval process associated with that. We've gone 2 clouds so far. I don't think we're stopping anytime soon. So the multi-cloud expansion is definitely 2022 as well as the future. So we're always having to look at adopting new clouds with the product. And then finally, of course, business processing and cost reduction strategies. We've already done a little work in that space around reducing costs for lab environments and dev environments over weekends and nights using those capabilities. But the lines of business are also coming to us, asking for ways to better process S3 bucket drop content and things like that. So business processing is definitely on the horizon, and it's one of the primary questions we're getting asked now that the lines of business are really starting to adopt the cloud and looking at more event-driven structures. So we're really excited about that. Shameless slide here. Please, if you are interested in anything that we're doing, reach out to us, either Raj or myself, or feel free to visit careers at JP. More than happy to have a conversation with you, and we're always interested in finding very good engineers. So feel free to reach out. All right, we're open for questions.
Great, thank you so much, Roy and Rajbr. That was amazing, and thank you so much for being so open. I hope everyone enjoyed it as well. If you have any questions, just feel free to type them in the chat window or in the Q&A tab. I did see a few come in.
Yeah, I've seen a few.
Let me just quickly check.
Why do each person have 2 titles? That's a financial institution thing. You've got your standard title and what you're hired in as, like SE and things like that, and then you also have like your responsibility. So that's kind of why you have 2 titles. How do we manage our exceptions in the environment? So that's handled right now through a deployment process along with integration with our risk managers. That's where I was talking about we need enhancements. We have a solution coming out very soon that will offer through a website the ability to have a whole governance process for risk managers to handle that without the need of developers. But today that's managed through that database solution that we've talked about as far as the design. Let's see, how do you manage the account, or how do you use account management? So that's the broker is actually a custom tool that we've written that allows us to onboard security services into our account. It doesn't just manage custodian, it manages, I would say, 13 or 14 other solutions. Essentially, it integrates into the build pipeline for the account, whether it's one cloud service or another. And then as the account's created, it's called out, and we kind of manage that in real time. And so it's actually function as a service, and we use a fleet of Lambdas to do that actually.
That's great. I think in the Q&A tab I had one too. I'm not sure if you're asking.
Sure, go ahead.
Talked about the workflow in the broker, correct?
Yeah, I just mentioned that with the broker. Yeah.
And let me see any other questions that folks have. We'll give everyone a few more seconds. Let me just double check all the chat. I think lots of kudos. I don't think anyone else. I think everyone got so many kudos. So thanks you so much for appreciate it. I think we especially appreciate, and the community appreciate, when a financial services organizations comes out. I know you have to share all the disclaimers and stuff. So, but thank you so much for sharing your story. Would you be around in the platform for a bit if people want to ask questions afterwards or ping you?
Yeah, we'll hang around. Sure.
We are about to go on a lunch, but let me just check the schedule. But I'll take a second to see if there are any more questions coming in. The event has like multiple chats. Just want to make sure I covered all of my bases. I think that's it. So I think I see something in the Q&A comment. Let me quickly check. Yes. At the end of the day, our exceptions handled with some sort of confidential tag that custodian filter checks for.
So I mean, what we have done is the way we the customizations that we added, we have essentially the policies get applied, and there's a precedence that gets applied. So we have got controls that can be enabled at the account level. Then there's a controls that get enabled at the capability level. So there could be multiple accounts with the same capability. So when it comes to exceptions, we apply those at the account level. So that's how we are able to dictate which exactly be very specific as to what accounts get what exceptions, because there's a precedence that we follow when the custodian is actually evaluating a control.
Yeah, we don't use C7N filters to do those checks. That's the customization we were talking about in the high level design, where we have that account management database. That database is integrated directly into each one of our custodian lambdas, and those lambdas check in real time to make sure that the event they're receiving, the account that's associated with that event, is configured to have that type of event happen, and what kind of responses we're checking for those things. So it's done outside of, well, it's an integration point within C7, and it's not it's a customization for sure.